Hello everyone and welcome to this live stream where we will be discussing the Russian Civil War, or as Prigozhin calls it, not a military coup, but a march for justice. And if you're wondering if you've heard that before, it is very similar to not a war, special military operation. So as we can see, there's already a lot of funny jokes going in between the Russian army and Wagner. So let's just start out with all of the information to get an overview of what's happening, and then we'll discuss what is actually happening. Starting out, we have some information from Remy going through here on the Remyland channel. He has direct connection with Wagner soldiers. So let's see what he has to say. First off, he writes emotions. Wagner returns to the front, and that very, very promptly. I said a few days ago that there will be more stories and statements from Prigozhin in the coming days. He prepares Wagner's return to the front and wants the whole country, Russia, to see it. Works well. Just keep calm and see what will happen. Keep your emotions under control and don't jump into hysteria about everything. A lot is made bigger than it is in the end. I could be wrong, but what I know, that's the case. Now that's very interesting, as we see here from Remy that he's essentially saying this is some sort of information campaign attempting to essentially play some cards for more PR. Then we have this Wagner channel, which posts a lot of official information from Wagner, as well as general Wagner information. So in this one, they first showed off this video here. This video essentially shows a quote-unquote strike on the Wagner forces, and something very, very interesting. Does this look like a strike to you guys? Just saying, this looks very weird. Like, let me see, it's not showing display capture, maybe up here. There you go. Okay. Does this look like a strike to you guys? Personally, I think this looks like someone just went down, started a fire with like a lighter, or was smoking too much and dropped their cigarettes into this pile of vegetation. Then they claim like this area right here, this is some sort of quote-unquote strike zone with a lot of what's it called? A lot of wounded, a lot of dead soldiers. Generally, this looks very fake. The strike zone itself, the video looks very fake. Then we see this information here. We were vilely deceived and tried to deprive us of the opportunity to defend our homes and disperse the Wagner PMC. We were ready to make concessions to the Ministry of Defense, surrender our weapons, and find a solution on how we would continue to defend our country. These scum launched rocket attacks on our rear camps. A large number of our soldiers died. We will decide how we will respond to this atrocity. The next step is ours, Evgeny Prigozhin. Continues to say, the evil that the military leadership of the country bears must be stopped. They neglect the lives of soldiers, they forgot the word justice, and we will return it. Those who destroyed our guys today will be punished. I ask you not to resist anyone. Everyone who tries to resist will be considered a threat, and we will destroy immediately. I ask everyone to remain calm and not succumb to provocations, stay in their homes. This is very hypocritical. I ask everyone to remain calm. This is clearly not calm. And not succumb to provocations. This is clearly succumbing to provocations. Stay in their homes. He's just saying he's not going to stay in his home. After we finish what we started, we will return to the front to defend our motherland. We will deal with those who destroy Russian soldiers and return to the front. Justice is in the troops will be restored, and after that, justice for all of Russia. Evgeny Prigozhin on the decision of Wagner PMC Commanders Council. Minister Shoigu cowardly fled from Rostov at 21:00. He fled as not to explain why he was raising helicopters to destroy the fighters, why he was launching missile strikes. This creature will be stopped, Evgeny Prigozhin. We are 25,000 and we're going to figure out why chaos is happening in the country. 25,000 are expected as a tactical reserve, and the strategic reserve is the whole army and the whole country. Anyone who wants to join, we need to end this mess. This is not a military coup, but a march for justice. Our actions do not interfere with troops in any way. The head of PMC also stressed that artillerymen and helicopter pilots of the Russian Defense Ministry were used in the dark to destroy the Wagner PMC. Putin is aware of the situation unfolding around Wagner PMC and Prigozhin, according to Peskov. So if we take this information, then it is very clear. Prigozhin is very angry. He's going straight to Moscow. He's going to depose Shoigu and Gerasimov for attacking Wagner PMC, and a civil war is starting. Now we move on to the next information. Here we have exactly, maybe, there we go. Here we have Rybar. Here it starts. According to Rybar, the public conflict between the head of Wagner PMC, Prigozhin, and Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu apparently is nearing its end. We're reaching the climax of the whole discussion. Everything coming down from the lack of ammunition, all of these issues that Prigozhin has been complaining about for months after months after months, all the way back to January. It's all reaching its peak. We're at the climax right now. We're seeing the armed confrontation between the Russian Ministry of Defense and Wagner PMC. Let's see what's happening. The Russian Defense Ministry denied the information about the attack on the rear camp of PMC Wagner. After Prigozhin's statements, additional enforcement measures were introduced on the Frunzenskaya embankment, which, however, have been in effect for the past 2 days due to ongoing counterterrorism measures. A military collegium is convened on the Frunzenskaya Street. A general meeting has been announced for the central bodies of military control. There are reports that units of the National Guard are raised in Gilgan. Prigozhin added to the register of foreign agents, according to the Ministry of Justice. The irony of 2023, Prigozhin, who in 2021 had blah blah blah. Here we are prompted in the feedback but to look at the metadata of Prigozhin's audio recordings, which are being uploaded right now. We checked indeed everything was recorded at 19 hours 25 minutes, and then it was uploaded at this was 21:49, which in Russian time is an hour ahead, so that would be 22:49. So they are essentially uploading things 3 hours after it was recorded. Well, it turns out that this is not an online military coup and the first military coup through delayed messages. So they're complaining about these things allegedly 3 hours after they happened. It has to make sure that everything is okay for the public. And then this is forwarded messages, and I'm not sure if this is just a translation error, but girls, I will say this, a person who has experienced a coup in his life, a couple of financial crises, the beginning of the special military operation and mobilization, cannot be frightened by any voices. Essentially, don't waste your time listening to what these old men are saying. And I completely agree with that statement. If we take a look at my own Telegram channel, we can take a look at this right here. First, we have to take a look at this new message right here. The Rostov police announced the fortress plan. The personnel must be in full readiness. A number of media confirm with reference to the security forces. There is an order to put the entire staff of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the Russian Guard, on alert and strengthen posts on the border with LPR and DPR. But there is no boil. It's just the train was raised and called. One of the law enforcement officers said to 161RU. The Department of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the Russian region has not yet commented on this information, promising to respond later. Anyways, moving on to my own channel right here. And this is my own statement. First off, I've been saying for months, Prigozhin is an actor. He likes to act. How does he act? He acts through essentially complaining about the situation, claiming that things aren't going well. In the Battle of Bakhmut, he kept complaining month after month that he had no ammunition. But night after night, we get new videos of heavy shelling on the Ukrainian positions, essentially non-stop shelling. So if you take that as no shells, then you can take this as a civil war in Ukraine, civil war in Russia, I mean. People may be confused as to who to trust. Answer is very simple. In war, no one. There's no one to trust in war. Everyone is going to lie. Everyone is going to make a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Don't judge by the words, judge by the actions. We'll see very soon if Wagner is suddenly in Ukraine, launching an offensive, catching them off guard, or if they're in Moscow and conduct a civil war. So essentially, we don't have to spend our time sitting here like, is Wagner going to attack Moscow, or is this just a complete ruse? That's not something we have to debate. All we have to think about is what is actually happening. Are they actually going to fight Russian forces within Russia? Or is this just some sort of operational strategy for misinformation to confuse the West, confuse Ukraine, just to adapt a lot of weird things? Like, this is a weird strategy. He has been running this for months now. And in the end, nothing has really happened. It's just old talk, old men talking to each other. It's all, as I said, he's an actor. It's just all an act. What we're seeing so far is nothing short of Prigozhin getting a lot of information. He's like the public spokesperson. And we have to remember, Prigozhin is just some random guy. He's a guy who has a personal relation to Putin, and he's gotten permission from Putin to start a military operation, to start a military corporation, a mercenary force. Do you think that Prigozhin could start Wagner PMC if he didn't get permission from Putin? Did you think he can build up an army of 50,000 soldiers if he didn't get permission from Putin? Do you think Putin is stupid enough to give permission to some guy he doesn't even trust to build an army of 50,000 soldiers within Russia? Like, personally, I don't think Putin is that stupid. Could be wrong, but personally, I don't think so. So essentially what I'm saying is that although there's a lot of misinformation and we can hardly trust any of the information going around, it is very, very clear to me that the only thing we need to do is sit back, relax, and see what people say. Ignore all of this talk about what is actually happening. In the reality, none of it matters, because all that matters is to see what actions they actually take. So that is my opinion on this. Don't believe it's a military coup. I don't think it's a march for justice. I don't think it's a special military operation within Russia. All I believe is that it's just back and forth talking about random stuff. And that they're just trying to divert information. If you take a look at Western mainstream media right now, all you will see is essentially, what do you say? Breaking news, Russia civil war, Prigozhin is going to attack Moscow. And it is the same with when he was talking about the lack of shells. Western media was eating it up. Russia is lacking shells, they don't have enough weapons. Suddenly, Bakhmut has fallen. Most likely see something similar. They will keep saying civil war in Russia, huge issues, and then suddenly Wagner is in Ukraine, they started a new offensive, something like that. It's not really difficult to see through these lies. It's a clear stay, to me at the very least. They have nothing to gain from this. This is all very stupid. Like, who goes onto Telegram, takes a couple of videos, oh, I'm going to start a military coup because the Russian Ministry of Defense launched missile strikes. Everyone join me. It's dumb. It's just stupid. All right. Let's hear from you guys. I have 1,887 concurrent viewers. That's already almost my record. I think my record is like 2,500. Let's see if we can hit that or something else. So, guys, the chat, what do you guys think? Do you have any questions? It's been a while since I did a live stream. Talk about Kosovo. Very funny joke. Are they that bored? Exactly. That's like I'm sitting here like, bro, what's the point of this? Are we really that bored? Do we have nothing to do? Like, if we take a look at the situation right now with the Ukrainian ongoing offensive, like let's zoom in. Let's zoom in on Zaporizhzhia. So if we take a look at this, what is actually happening? Fighting is happening kilometers from the front line, from the first line of defense. They are fighting at the point of contact, a lot of back and forth in all parts, like here, back and forth, here, back and forth, and here. There's been a lot of forth, not a lot of back, since the Russians were unable to capture Makarivka. They've been fighting there for a while, but now there's nothing to be taken there. Generally, in conclusion, the Ukrainians have essentially captured a few villages on the front line, no significant advances. And then what are we seeing? We're seeing just continuous fighting by the front line, by the point of contact. According to a Ukrainian narrative, they're just continuing their probing attacks. Main event is still coming. They're going to launch a large force as soon as they detect one of these weak points. And then they're just going to run down straight to Tokmak, straight to Melitopol, and cut off the Sea of Azov in one fell swoop. That is the Ukrainian narrative. The Russian narrative is essentially, they haven't even reached the first line of defense. How are they going to do anything? We're just going to sit back and wait. In reality, the Ukrainians have a force of 50,000. They may have already used up 10,000, lost off them a couple of thousand. Essentially, not huge losses, but no real gains either. But they still have the offensive power. That's not a question. The real question is, what about the Russians? The Russians have their mobilized forces, they have their regular forces. It's very difficult to discern exactly how many forces they actually have, because the Russian forces have a lot of contracts that just run out, then they return to the back. They have rotations, ongoing rotations. It's not all troops that are at the front at the same time. There's a lot of factors we have to consider. Also, the casualties, it's unclear how many casualties they have taken. So there's a lot of factors to look at if we want to take a look at the situation. But something that is very clear is the fact that the Russian forces is now today much larger in Ukraine than it was at the start of the war. Yet according to the latest talks by Shoigu, a whole new army of 160,000, as well as Wagner forces. If these end up clashing, then they'll severely drop the amount of troops they have in reserve, but they will essentially still have 100,000 in reserve. That will be significantly less than 200,000 that I estimated, without all of this drama about a Russian civil war. But essentially, if we assume 100,000 or 200,000, depending on whether or not there's a civil war in Russia, or if you can even call this a civil war, like this is so much in favor of Russia that it cannot even be considered a civil war, because even if Wagner attacks with 25,000 soldiers, at the very most it will be like they'll just send 100,000, 200,000, they'll outnumber them 4-1 or 8-1, and they'll just encircle them and end them off. So this is not a armed conflict. This is essentially just a joke. And how many of the Wagner soldiers are Russian soldiers? How many of them will be willing to go against the Russian army? It makes no sense, and generally the information doesn't point in that direction. But we still have to consider the odds. I actually saw something very interesting. That is, if we look at Twitter, there is this guy I follow. What's his name? Russians with Attitudes. He is a podcast guy from Russia. And he says right here, 5 options. Option 1 is a psyop to cover up a serious Russian offensive. That is a very real possibility, in my opinion. Option 2, we're going to World War III with NATO. I think that's a much lower possibility. Option 3, it's real and Putin is using Prigozhin to get rid of Shoigu. I actually believe that is also a possibility. If Putin believes Prigozhin, Shoigu is a threat, then this could be a very real attempt to get rid of him. Option 4, it's real and Wagner has actually become a coup d'etat. That is, I would probably rate that lower than World War III with NATO, because no one's going to try a coup with essentially no forces. There's no coup that has succeeded without the support of the armed forces of the country. Without the support of the Russian army, this is destined to fail. And then option 5, it's the behind the curtains negotiation, and it gets nipped in the bud before it escalates. So essentially, this is what's it called? Prigozhin wants some concessions from the Russian Ministry of Defense. They want better deal, better contract, something like that. And this is just all about that. He just wants some benefits from the contracts. That is also a real possibility. But essentially what I'm saying is option 1 and option 5 are the most likely ones. Either it's a psyop to cover up a serious Russian offensive, or it's behind the curtain negotiations that is just about getting a better deal from the Russian Ministry of Defense. So that is my takes. And then we go back to Deep State map, because that is a very interesting map to take a look at if we want to see what is going to happen. So where is Wagner currently located? As far as I know, either in the rear within the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, or somewhere within the southern parts of Russia. And then there was some news about them being relocated to Belgorod, which would essentially put them right here in the Eastern Front. Then we take a look at the Russian forces here in the Eastern Front. We have the 20th Combined Arms Army, we have the 41st Combined Arms Army, we have the 4th Guards Tank Division, we have the 90th Tank Division, we have we have the 144th Guards Motor Rifle Division, we have a lot of units. What does this mean? This means that the general units here, the 4th Guards Tanks Division and the 90th Tank Division, these are tank divisions. They have hundreds of tanks. Combine this with a undercover surprise visit from Wagner supporting these guys, and a army of 160,000 that is going to be formed by the end of June. That's 200,000 additional troops, in addition to the 2 tank divisions, in addition to 2 armies being located in Luhansk. That is a huge force. The 200,000 alone is essentially what the Russians started the invasion with, attacking on 3 different fronts. Putting all of these in one front, in addition to the forces already there, would put the balance of force would be so much in favor of the Russians that Ukraine could essentially just lie down and die. That is how huge of a force this is. Especially if they're using up their offensive power in the Zaporizhia front, where they're not even reaching the first line of defense. So what I'm saying is, the Russians have a significant advantage right now. However, this could also indicate that this is not a joke and that is actually real, because when the infighting happen, it's not when they are under pressure, it's once this pressure is relieved. If Prigozhin is thinking, okay, we have won this war, we just need to sit back and relax and it's won, we need to get a better deal out of this. So this is when we make issues to get a better deal. So it could be true. However, I believe, as the first option was stated by Russians with attitude, that this is a psyop, it's a psychological operation, it is a media manipulation operation to confuse the West, confuse Ukraine, and just divert the attention from a possible Russian offensive. This is the perfect time for a Russian offensive. Why? Because the Russians are holding back the Ukrainian offensive, and they have a significant reserve force. They have everything needed for an offensive. It is also the end of June, so the terrain is perfect for an offensive, as the weather is dry, the ground is dry, and armored vehicles can just drive through the fields. So what I'm saying is, if this is not true, if this is not a civil war in Russia, then we will be seeing a Russian offensive very soon, because they have all their units available, they have everything they need, they have no excuse to not launch an offensive. So essentially what we're seeing is the Russians is doing a psychological operation, they're doing misinformation, disinformation, all of this to trick the Ukrainian forces, to trick the West, and essentially launch a surprise attack. However, the Ukrainians still have intelligence forces. They have deep reconnaissance groups, they have drones, they have satellite imagery, they have a lot of stuff. They will easily detect a large buildup of Russian forces. So how much is this, how well is this going to work? What is the point of all of this? In the end, it's difficult to discern. But all that is important right now is to see what is actually happening. Never look at what they're saying, always look at what is happening. Yeah, that is my general opinion. Let's look at a few more comments. Hello, can you tell me the Russians possibly get offensive on Kupiansk? Yes, very easily. They have Belgorod right to the north. They gather a bunch of forces. They just to go down. We have the Uskal River line right here. This is essentially the biggest river going through the southern parts. We have Liman on the eastern part and Izium on the western part. We have a significant Ukrainian buildup of forces here as they try to hold the line here on the east of the Uskal River for a future incursion into the Luhansk region. And then we have a huge buildup of Russian forces by Svatova and Kreminna. Then if we get some Russian forces from the north going through the western bank of the Uskal River through the Russian border, then move downwards south towards Kupiansk, move westwards, similar to a reverse Ukrainian Kherson offensive, Kharkiv offensive, and then just move around like we did earlier, and essentially cut off the Ukrainian forces behind the Uskal River. They will cut them off, then they launch an attack towards Liman, and they essentially encircle of the Ukrainian forces here. They capture Liman and Izium, and they will essentially have cut off a huge amount of Ukrainian forces, and they will have recaptured Liman and Izium, which could give them two options. Either continue southwards in the direction of the Donetsk region, Donbas region, and just try to do an operation similar to what everyone was saying at the start of the war. Russia is going to encircle the Ukrainian forces. They're going to do a two-pronged pincer attack to try and cut off the Ukrainian forces in the Donetsk region. However, at that time, they had 200,000 troops all over the whole country. Now they have upwards of 500,000 to 600,000 troops, somewhere around there. So 3 times as many. Much more doable today than it was back then, especially if the Ukrainians have used up their offensive power and the Russians have a sudden influx of, let's say, 200,000 troops. Or they'll have the option to just go westwards, either towards Dnipro or northwards towards essentially cutting off Kharkiv, attacking from these multiple directions. You could also be looking to open another front here in the north, either through Belarus or just through the Russian zones here to the northeast of Ukraine, Bryansk, Kursk, and so on. They have a lot of options. And in the end, if the Russian forces are able to reach the Dnieper River, they can cut off 80% of the Ukrainian army. It will essentially be over. So they could be looking to run some sort of huge offensive, cut off all the Ukrainian army, all of these things. In the end, we don't know. It's hard to tell. We don't have the information Ukraine has. All we have is open source intelligence. It is always delayed. It is always delayed. The information we have is multiple days delayed. The latest updates that I give is at the very, very, very earliest 1 day delayed. That is the closest information you'll get to what is happening, a day delayed. Most of the time, we get multiple days of delay, either 3, 4, 5 days of delay. We've even had times where the information was delayed by weeks. However, right now, by the Zaporizhzhia front, most of the information is a couple of days delayed, 2 or 3 days. What we see here, it's a couple of hours delayed, but this is internal, it's nothing to do with operational security and all of that stuff. If I had information available right here, right now, then of course I would share that, because as I've been saying, I'm neutral, I don't care for either side. If someone gives me secret information, I'll share it. I don't care, but that's probably why I'm not receiving secret information, because I'll just share it. Yeah, so all of the information I have is delayed. But what I can tell you for sure is that based on the information I have, Ukraine is, their forces, it's very hard to tell how many forces each side has. If I knew how much forces each side has, Russia and Ukraine would both know, and would just easily discern what tactics is best to use. I believe the reason we see a lack of Russian offensive operations is because they assume Ukraine has forces in reserve that will be able to deal with that. However, if we do see a Russian offensive operation, then it's because they discern that the Ukrainians do not have the capabilities to deal with it. So essentially what we're seeing is going to be based on whether or not the Russians believe that they're able to succeed or not. But again, there's a lot of information we don't know much about. All right, a quick ad for myself. Most live streams barely give me any money. So if you want to help me out, you can drop a donation. I'll definitely read your comment if you leave a donation. Best is through PayPal, but you can also do it through Super Chats. Although Super Chats take about 30% for YouTube, PayPal takes about 10%. So it's a better rate. But either way, I'll read the message and I'll respond to the message. Also, check out my Patreon. Anyways, back to it. Let's look at some comments, random comments based on what you're asking. What do you think about Putin's words that another mobilization is needed to push Kiev? Didn't he say the opposite? Didn't he say that they don't need another mobilization? They have enough volunteers. They're even saying that they don't even need more volunteers because they have more than enough. I remember when Russia announced goodwill from Kherson, you said if they just leave it without a fight, they're stupid. Guess what happened next? Well, they left it without a fight. Do you have any information that Wagner is now actually positioned to invade Kharkiv? I have no information of that. I have no idea where they're positioned. I have no idea where they're prepared. All I know is that they are essentially doing this operation. I think it's a misinformation operation. I could be wrong. As someone said, goodwill from Kherson. Well, I don't think they never said it was goodwill. They said it was a strategic retreat. Essentially, what I'm saying is I am wrong many times. However, I try to keep improving. I try to be more accurate. And what matters is that I look at both sides. Jake Leningrad on plus. Bro, this map is the temporarily occupied territory of Republic of Ishkeria. I had never heard of Ishkeria before this. Occupied, yeah, these I think make sense. Transnistria. Then we have East Prussia is temporarily occupied. Bro, this is too funny. And then we have occupied Latvia territories, occupied Pejorsky district. We have occupied Estonia territories and temporarily occupied territory of Karelia as a result of the winter wars. Occupied Sala and occupied Pizzano. Honestly, my opinion, if you didn't want this territory to be occupied, maybe you shouldn't invade the Soviet Union. Either way, I don't really care about these things. They're just funny to me. Like, this map isn't even pro-Ukrainian, it's just anti-Russian. Regardless, let's see if there's there we go, they've marked out occupied southern Kuril Islands. There we go. Anyways, oh, the sinking of Russian cruiser Moskva. a place of departure to the bottom of the night, 13 to 14 of April. Exact coordinates. Goodbye, Moskva. It was nice knowing you. And even Snake Island recaptured. There we go. Ukrainian soldiers has landed and Ukrainian flag has been raised. Occupied by Muscovy. Bro. It's funny. It's like this is why we need to learn about history. If you don't know about history, people can use history to their own advantage to manipulate the information and just throw you off guard, confuse you, and take advantage of the situation. Let's look at some other comments. Why was an invasion from Belarus to cut off the border never on the cards? I think generally because it is so far from the front line. If the Russians use in force 200,000, let's say 200,000 through Belarus towards Western Ukraine, Russia, first of all, doesn't know how the West would react. They may react, they may not react, they don't know. So that's one part that's risky. The other part is if they use and force to invade through Belarus, let's say 100 or 200,000, if they have that much in reserve, they can use that, sure. However, if Ukraine then decides, alright, we'll give up eastern Ukraine, retreat across the Dnieper River, and then try to fight these guys first, cut them off, encircle them, destroy them. Russia loses 200,000 troops, captures eastern Ukraine. Ukraine still has a lot of troops, either invades Belarus just straight out, or tries to go northwards. Either way, try to recapture. Russia's just lost 200,000 troops, they're vulnerable, and Ukraine just gets a huge advantage. So there's a lot of potential benefits to this plan, but there's a lot of risks as well. And from what we've seen so far, Russia hates risks this war. They're essentially taking no risks. So they only do things if they're sure that they're going to win. Wagner started the fire. It was always burning since special military operation is turning. Wagner started the fire. This is funny. All right. It's all occupied Mongol and Roman territory. Exactly. This is all like Ukraine is, bro. Half of Ukraine, Western Ukraine, including Kiev, is just a Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Crimea is from the Golden Horde, ancient Mongol territory, 800 years ago. And let's see, Moscow is, honestly, it's just, what's the oldest civilization there? I'm not really sure. Probably, the Mongols probably reached there sometime in the past. Let's see. Turkey is clearly occupied Byzantine territory, Roman territory. Germany is clearly occupied Holy Roman Empire territory. We cannot disregard that. Terrible occupation. Denmark is clearly occupied Viking territory. We have to return to the olden Viking traditions. Do you agree calling Russia Muscovy is cringe? Honestly, like Muscovy, Russia, it's the same thing. I don't really know. It's like synonyms. It's no point. They're using it as an insult. It's like Moscow is, or Russia is Kievan Rus. Yes, they are. Like, what are you trying to say? Russia is Muscovy. Yes, it is. It used to be Muscovy, and now it's Russia. It's just a change of name. It doesn't make any sense. Like saying, oh, Ukraine is also Kievan Rus. Like, Ukraine's history is Russian history. They return to the same thing. Other than that, we have the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth that used to occupy Kiev. We have the Ottomans that reached southern Ukraine. We have the Mongols that reached the area. We have so many different countries that occupied Ukraine. Ukraine is a history of occupation. Throughout its whole history, it's been occupied. If not by Russia, then a lot of other countries. Parts of it has been occupied by different countries. We have had Romania occupying Ukraine. You have had Germany occupying Ukraine. You have had Poland occupying Ukraine. We have had Tartars, Mongols, Russians. We have had just generally so many civilizations, so many countries occupying Ukraine. Ukraine is fields. It's just like Poland. So many countries have occupied Poland. So many countries have occupied Belarus. It's history. Have you ever read any time period that spent more than 10 years without war happening in that specific area prior to the 1800s? Like if you go between 1500s and like 800, you will hardly ever find a decade that is not included with some sort of war. Usually there's always some sort of huge war going on. Like I have just had some history classes on the Middle East. Very, very interesting. And I definitely recommend looking up Middle Eastern history, especially the invasion of the Mongols. So essentially, let's give you a quick history lesson. So about 800, 900, 1,000 years ago, the Mongol Empire started. They were a tiny group of tribes. Well, generally, this whole area was essentially Mongols. And then Genghis Khan gathered the Mongols here, went southwards into China, went westwards into Xinjiang, Central Asia, Russian territory. After Genghis Khan died, it was split into 4 areas. There was the Golden Horde to the northwest. There was the Chagatai in the center. There was the Yuan dynasty in the southeast, and there was the final part. I don't remember the name. Let's find 4 Mongol Khanates. There we go. Golden Horde, Yuan, Ilkhanate. That's right. It's the Ilkhanate. It was here in the southwest. So the Ilkhanate decided to invade the Islamic countries because back then, Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, all of these countries were all Muslim countries. So the Ilkhanate invaded these countries. They captured Iran, they captured Afghanistan. At this time, Iraq was the center of the Islamic civilization. Baghdad was it was a city with 1 million people. They had huge universities. What's it called? The area where you have books, libraries. They had medicine, hospitals. They had everything. It was like a modern society. It's very well advanced, very, very rich. They had a lot of culture, a lot of history, everything from Central Mediterranean, ancient Greece, ancient Rome. All of their works, all of their theories, all of that stuff was translated into Arabic. It was studied. It was a thriving society in the golden age. The Mongols came knocking. They said, please surrender. We don't want to fight. According to the Great Yuan dynasty, the Great Khanate, they don't want us to fight. They want us to just be a satellite state under the Mongols. They don't want to fight anymore. They say, no, we do not want to surrender. The defense minister of Baghdad at that time was like, bro, the Mongols just taken half of Asia. How are we going to fight this? Although we do have an army of 100,000 soldiers, they are not trained. They have no experience. The equipment is trash. And the Mongols are out there with 200,000 soldiers. They're well equipped, well experienced. They've just captured half of Asia. We're not going to win. He then betrays the city, betrays the country, and tells the leader of the Ilkhanate, you know what? I'm not going to win. I'm just going to tell you where the weak points are, and then you give me some benefits. They make this deal. The Mongols breach the walls. They they kill everyone. They massacre the 1 million population. Not a single man, woman, child, elderly, anything. All of them completely slaughtered. They take the libraries, they take the universities, take all of the books, all of these things, throw it in the river, burn it up, everything. There are huge piles of bodies, millions of dead, or 1 million dead, and it is said that the Tigris River, the river that goes through the Baghdad, it was turned black due to the ink of the books being thrown into the river. That is how terrible it was. Completely, essentially just wiped out the civilization there. This made both then Turkey, that was the Seljuk Turks who ruled the eastern parts and southern parts of Turkey. We had there was the Abbasid Caliphate in Iraq, completely eradicated. We had some other Islamic tribes and countries. They all essentially surrendered, except for two. We had the Ottomans. This is in the 1200s, so this is before the Ottomans were strong. This is where they were essentially just they just started out. So the Ottomans were a group of Turkish tribes who were separated from the Seljuk Turks and essentially were occupying Western Anatolia, Ankara, Bursa, Izmir, these areas. And then we had the Mamluks. The Mamluks were essentially the Ayyubid dynasties. Saladin al-Ayyubi, he conquered Egypt, the Islamic parts, Mecca, Medina. He even took Jerusalem, and that was essentially a country. He died. His children took over, and then he had some slave fighters. You can call them mercenaries, whatever. They were raised on Islamic principles and education and so on. And they were essentially slaves who were very loyal to the Ayyubid dynasty. However, the Ayyubid dynasty became very corrupt. They essentially didn't do what's best for the country, the Mamluks, which was what they were called, these slave soldiers. They thought, okay, we are very loyal to these guys, but they are corrupt. We don't care about them. We're going to fix everything. So we're going to make a coup and take over the country. So we can say this is maybe what Prigozhin is thinking. The country is very corrupt. We're going to save it. We're going to make a coup and take control of the country. But essentially, the Mamluks did this. They took control of the country. But here, in this time and age, they had 20,000 soldiers. And now they're going to face off against 200,000 Mongol soldiers, well equipped, well trained, everything is perfect for them. Then the first miracle happens. The king of the Yuan dynasty, essentially the biggest Khanate of the Mongols, he dies. He has two sons. They fight over the power. So the Ilkhanate ruler goes back with 180,000 troops, leaving 20,000 troops to take the Mamluks, and then settles this thing by choosing a side and supporting whoever he wants to win. And then 20,000 versus 20,000 takes place in here by Ain Jalut. It is here by the northeastern parts, south of the Sea of Galilee. And the Mamluks win. They beat the 20,000 Mongols. Great battle. You should definitely check it out. There's a lot of books, there's a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of information about this battle. It is exactly the same place as David versus Goliath. A great battle. The Mamluks win. Egypt stands. The Islamic world stands. And then the guy from the Ilkhanate who took 180,000 troops back to China, okay, he has settled the thing, he's going back. He hears about the defeat and he's like, okay, our 20,000 soldiers didn't work. Let's send all of our 180,000 troops against the 20,000 Egyptian troops, the Mamluk troops. So it's a 9-1 advantage. 180,000 against 20,000. There's no way the Mamluks win this. Like, count the miracles out. This is not going to happen. But then again, you can never underestimate God, because God plans and humans plans, but God is the best of planners. And essentially, the fourth Khanate, here, let's get a picture. So we have the Khanate of the Golden Horde, the Ilkhanate, the Chagatai Khanate, and the Khanate of the Great Han Yuan dynasty. This one, the Golden Horde, suddenly the leader of that, he says, or the story, as the story goes, he's out on a walk at night. He sees a caravan. By the way, if you look at the picture, you can see Khanate of the Golden Horde includes Crimea, southern Ukraine. They do not include Moscow and Kiev, but they have southern Ukraine and southern Russia. So yeah, they are occupying it. See, told you. Anyways, so the story goes, the leader of the Golden Horde, he goes through the night, he's sitting there, sees a Muslim caravan, goes there and he sees them, he talks with them, and the night ends with the leader of the Golden Horde converting to Islam. He then goes on the next day, talks with his advisors, talks with all of those guys. The whole elite of the Golden Horde converts to Islam. He then declares war on the Ilkhanate. He says, I will defend the Muslim countries, I'll defend the Mamluks, I'll defend the Ottomans, I'll defend the holy cities of Islam, I'll avenge the Abbasid dynasty. So, Khanate of the Golden Horde with the 200,000 troops fight the Ilkhanate with the 200,000 troops, and then the Mamluks and the Ottomans attack the Ilkhanate on 3 fronts. And essentially a 100-year-long battle begins, where the Khanate of the Golden Horde and the Ilkhanate, they battle each other, the Ottomans battle, the Mamluks battle, and essentially it ends with the Ilkhanate losing. Then comes in the year of the late 1300s, we see a man who is known as a psychopath who is handicapped. It is, his nickname is Timur Lane, which means Timur the Handicapped. And essentially his handicap is that his left arm is paralyzed. So what happens here is that Timur Lane comes from the Ilkhanate area. He himself is a professed Muslim. But essentially he goes to war with the Golden Horde, with the Ottomans and the Mamluks, and he destroys them. He goes from whatever they are holding here in this picture, and he just goes all the way to Izmir, final line of the Ottoman defenses. They reach Jerusalem again. They're just destroying everyone. They're even winning against the Golden Horde. And then he dies. And then his sons are like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then they just split the empire up into multiple parts, and the Ottomans just recapture all of the parts, the Mamluks recapture all of the parts. However, from this war, the Mamluks would never recover again. The Ottomans then gain a foothold in Anatolia, capture most of modern-day Turkey, and then this end, he dies. Timur dies in 1405. That is 48 years before the Ottoman capture of Constantinople. So essentially, so many things happen. You never know what happens. Just like this story. The Ilkhanate, the Timurs, they reach all the way to Izmir, the final stand of the Ottoman Empire, and then he just randomly dies. And suddenly they are all back on their feet again. You can never predict what's going to happen. It is stupid. It's like, imagine Russia just pushes all the way to Lviv, Putin dies, civil war erupts in Russia, and Ukraine just captures everything back again. That is at the level of what's happening, of what happens in history. It's like the Germans push all the way up to Moscow, then they're pushed back to Berlin. These things happen. It's like a fairy tale. It's like reading a novel. It's very weird, but in the end, what we see is just these miracles happen in real life. You never know what happens, but in the end, what happens is that you can't predict what's going to happen. That's all I have to say about that. Thanks for this great history religions. Bro, the best history religions of my life. Also, I got a donation at some point, $5 from Westusian Archives. Can you say hello to my friend who loves this channel? Her name is Panzer Fries. Been watching the channel since Soledad. Great channel. Thank you very much. Hello, Panzer Fries. I was told to say hello, so hello. And thank you very much for the support. I'm very happy that you're a fan of my channel. Thank you very much for the support. You see, monetary donations through PayPal, through Super Chats, they help me do this as a job. But the support from everyone who watches my channel, that gives me the emotional support I need to continue doing this channel. Because it's not enough to get the money. The money is what I need to live. That's the basic necessity. Emotional support is something that helps me a lot. When you say you support me, when you mention you like me, all of these things, they give me emotional support to be happy with what I'm doing, to feel like I'm actually doing a difference. That means a lot to me as well. 9/11, donation from controlled demolition. God will help us and end the war soon. Yes, honestly, the best thing that could happen is that the war ends soon. I don't care who wins. If the war ends soon, less human suffering. Just very difficult to explain my view on these things because my view is not a normal view. So I'm just gonna, see what happens and continue that way. But yeah, generally what I'm saying is a lot of stuff happen. We can never predict what's going to happen. One day, Ukraine launches a offensive. The next day, Russia is in a civil war. The third day, Russia launches an offensive. Ukraine suddenly captures Moscow. A new interim government is set up in Kazan. They launch a huge offensive, takes all of Ukraine, pushes into Romania and Poland. NATO mobilizes attacks. China launches nukes. Whole world is at World War III. Africa is just in the sidelines watching what's happening. Same with South America. They just check it out. They're like, oh, look, fireworks. And then they just sit out. They wait out the whole nuclear war. The West, Russia, China, India, everything is destroyed. Africa is just sitting there chilling. And they're like, dang, we missed. Great movie. Let's make some movies about this. They go and settle all of Europe. They settle all of North America. They settle all of Asia. Start a new civilization. Like, that is a very real possibility. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say that this is not going to happen, but I'm not going to say it's very likely to happen. The point is, from history, we never know what's going to happen. We've seen I'm going to keep referring to the Middle East because I'm Muslim, so I know a lot more about Muslim history than much else of history. But essentially, a guy, Prophet Muhammad, he is sitting here in the city of Mecca. He lives there, and then suddenly he gets hit with what I believe divine revelation from God. Then suddenly he builds up a country over 23 years. He gathers or controls all of Saudi Arabia. 20 years into the future, suddenly this little guy in the little city of Mecca, in the desert, surrounded by mountains, with essentially tribal people, similar to the Mongols. And then suddenly they capture essentially all of North Africa, the whole Middle East, defeat the Persian and the Byzantine empires. Similar to the Mongols. Mongols were a bunch of tribes. They were riding on horses. Suddenly they captured China, Central Asia, the Middle East, modern day Ukraine and Russia. It's like these crazy things happen. It's like imagining the Equatorial Guinea. Suddenly a guy gets hit by its inspiration. He goes on a trip, captures Gabon, Republic of Congo, Cameroon, Central African Republic, gathers all of Africa, unites it into a one country, conquers the rest of Northern Africa, Eastern Africa, captures the Middle East, and then suddenly he dies. His 5 sons each take a part. One rules North Africa, one rules South Africa. Bro, these weird... I'm just sitting here like, what the heck is history? Like, I definitely recommend read about history. It's absurd. It's crazy. And it's the funniest thing ever to just read about history, because you read these things and you think, no way this happens. But it did. It literally happened. So don't think Russia invaded Ukraine. Oh my God, this is very weird. No, it's not. It's natural, it's normal. Read about history. This is one of the most peaceful wars in history. The Mongol invasion, they killed about, I don't remember here, what percentage of the world did the Mongols kill? 11%. They killed 11% of the world population. That corresponds to 800 million people today. 800 million. Imagine if that happened today. That's like World War III level. We look at World War II. They killed 60 million in Europe soldiers. 60 million soldiers. Then we add the civilian casualties. We reach hundreds of millions. And then we are sitting here like, Russia is the worst country in the world. We have to internationally isolate them. We have to do all of these things. It makes no sense historically. So many countries within the last 50 years are so much worse than what Russia is doing right now. Not saying that, not excusing what Russia is doing. I'm just saying it's weird. Like, what is happening? I don't understand. From day one, I don't understand what the response is like. Anyways, final point of this stream. By the way, this stream will be privated. I have a Patreon. Let me go to Patreon. So it'll not be private, it'll be unlisted. And if we look at membership, there are 3 tiers. $3.50, that is a private community. $7.50, exclusive content, private community. $15, you get the archives of all of the live streams. All of the live streams I've done will be archived into my Patreon. This one will be archived into my Patreon, while everyone else will be unlisted. You will not have it publicly available. Thank you, Aria Adiga, for a $49.99, essentially $50 donation. Thank you very much. It's a super sticker. Transformers, very cool. Thank you very much for the donation. That is the biggest donation I've received on Super Chat. Thank you very much. I don't even know what that is, but have fun. Thank you very much for the $5 donation. Can you at least do clip and publicize the History Legends part of the stream, please? You know what? I've always wanted to do a history channel. Maybe I should. And then I'll make a video about the History Legends part. And I'll do many more videos about history. Essentially, I love history, so I'm going to read it regardless. I might as well make a video of what I read. And then we'll see a history channel popping out during the summer, since I have some extra time on my hands. But I also have to do some other stuff. But yeah. Would you have on? bro. What do you think about Trump, please? I want to know about your opinion. Okay, let me go on a not History Legends rant, but on a politics rant, real quick. What is my opinion on Trump, dude? He doesn't even look like an orange. I don't know what the people call an orange man. He has somewhat of a tan or whatever oil products he's using to color his face. I think it's very weird that they get like, in a nutshell, I think US politics is a shit show. I think the two options being Joe Biden and Donald Trump, it's a freaking joke. Like, if of the 300 million population, that is the two best candidates available, then the US is in deep trouble if that is the two best candidates they can show up with. I've seen like the Democratic primary, the Republican primary. All of the options are so bad. It's terrible. So bad. Like, someone is mentioning someone in the chat that I'm not going to say, because apparently if you say the name, you get banned on YouTube. And again, like, it's crazy how... Okay, wait, no. I shouldn't be talking about US politics because I'll get banned on YouTube. Because apparently talking about US politics get you banned on YouTube. But basically, US politics is crazy. Crazy. It's not normal. That is not what I would call a logical and normal democracy, well-functioning democracy. That is not the United States. The United States is very weird when it comes to politics, and it's not natural. When Islam tried to move through the Caucasus Mountains and were stopped, who was it they encountered? That is a great question. I know they captured. Maybe they didn't like. Generally, the fact that there are mountains makes it very difficult to cross through them. So maybe they thought it is a great natural barrier to stop, so that they can focus on other areas like Turkey and the east. Like, I know. Generally, the situation is that they like if you have to think about it, a large empire needs natural barriers. Why? Because no empire in history is able to protect all of its borders because it's way too big. Many empires fall because they overstretch. They have too much areas they have to defend and not enough troops. So if you look at the Islamic empires, the Umayyad, the Abbasid empires, had essentially the same territory. They captured Spain all the way here to the northern parts. That is a small border they have to defend, including mountains. They had mountain ranges here to the north, so they didn't have to defend much. Then we have the Turkey part. This is all hills and mountains, so not a lot to defend. The Caucasus Mountains, not a lot to defend. They have the whole of country of Iran, being a country of mountains and deserts. They had control of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Turkmenistan. All of these are mountains and deserts. Generally, nowhere to really defend. They had all of the Arabian Peninsula, North Africa, again, mountains and deserts. They had no real place to defend. If someone invaded, they can just mobilize their forces and send them there before they do any progress, really. So probably the main reason why they didn't cross the Caucasus isn't because they were prevented from doing so, but because it is a stupid move. Thank you for the 9/11 donation. If a censored person wins, the group who killed a censored person and censored person will be put out. He stated that he is aware that the CIA censored. That looks interesting. And thank you very much for the donation. Russian generals just made a video. We've been in. It's not fake. Okay, let's take a quick look at this. We have what's it called? Syriac Maps just posted. Let's look what he says. Window capture. There we go. Many false news regarding the current situation in Russia. Tomorrow, all things will be clear. No truth about problems in the front line. War will continue as today, sadly. Very clear and concise. Then we have Surovikin's statement to Prigozhin. The leadership of Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, for our troops, for our commanders, our soldier volunteers, doing the task fighting the enemy to the death, superior enemy forces take losses, insist on their positions. I pool with the leadership, commanders, and fighters. Circus not available with you. We went to work hard way. We fought together with you. Normal if losses but one blood. Yulin I call restore. The enemy is only waiting for us to aggravate the internal political situation. You cannot play into the hands of the enemy in these difficult times for the country. Before it's too late, and it is necessary to do so, is to obey the will and the order of the nation, the elected president of the Russian Federation. Leave columns, return them, last order to or area to agree to solve all problems only by peaceful means, under the leadership of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. Yep, transcribed with Google Translate. That did sound like a Google Translate thing, because that was very weird. So yeah, generally, blah, blah, blah. All calm currently in Russia. There are no fights or clashes neither in Rostov nor in Moscow anywhere. Nothing is happening near the building of the Wagner Center in St. Petersburg at all. So yeah, as I've been saying, this is just a funny joke on Wagner's part. Defense of Ukraine, we are watching. Ha ha ha, very funny. yeah, so generally seems like misinformation, no serious thing. According to the FSB, all information disseminated in social networks on behalf of, let me show it, on behalf of Prigozhin about the missile and bomb attacks allegedly inflicted by the Ministry of Defense on rear units of the Wagner PMC is untrue and is all an informational provocation. The Russian armed forces continue to carry out combat missions, blah, blah, blah. Could anyone translate the post, blah, blah, blah. Let's look at this. Appeal of General Armies Sergei Surovikin. So this is the transcribed version that was through Google Translate on DPA's channel. Ryber is saying blah, blah, blah. Same message from Surovikin. So yeah, generally it seems nothing's happening. Oh, according to this channel right here, armored vehicles are driving around Moscow. Let's take a look. If it allows me to take a look. There we go. Armored vehicles driving through Moscow. There you go. Nothing's happening in that video. But yeah, as you can see, conflicting information. Generally, that is exactly what you need if you want to confuse everyone. And what we're seeing is essentially a continuation of some sort of acting lesson by Prigozhin. He's telling the Russian forces, if you want to act, this is how you act. Then he's leading by example. Very great job as your leader. Leading by example is exactly how you do it. In all seriousness, generally, it's a very confusing situation. Everything will be clear tomorrow, as Suryak Map says. A lot of information, blah, blah, blah. So generally, quote-unquote civil war, I don't think that's very likely. I don't think the Russian forces will support Prigozhin. Although they got very famous and popular from Bakhmut. Again, Bakhmut is a city. Russia has captured much more than that through the war. They've also lost a lot more. But in the end, they are still adapting to the situation. And in general, the situation looks in favor of the Russian forces, considering what the situation was prior to the invasion. The Russians have control of more than they had at the start. They still do not face any real threat, since they're able to hold back the Ukraine offensive so far. So generally, I don't think there's any indication of a collapse of Russian forces, Russian political spectrum, any of that stuff. Thanks for the explanation. Could it be fake? Yeah, it could be. If one were to charge you with the difficult task of making a peace plan, would work for both sides, what would it look like? So there is no peace plan that would work for both sides. Wait, let me fix that. There's one peace plan that I believe would work for both sides. However, no one would agree to it, despite it working for both sides. So essentially what I would say is similar to the African delegation to Ukraine. The four regions, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk and Luhansk, get to vote for their own fate. This will be a vote that will be overseen by the United Nations. So African nations, China, India, all of these will get access to oversee the referendum. And then for the rest, then they will have to agree on some sort of security guarantee for Ukraine, either a UN guaranteed security deal or something else. But essentially, if you have to look at Russian demands and Ukrainian demands, Ukraine, their number one demand is that they get full control over all of their regions. However, it seems that that is not something Russia wants to compromise on. They want, at the very least, for them to hold referendums. And from the Ukrainian perspective, leaving them to determine their own fate is, in my eyes, democratic. So if they want better relations with the EU and NATO, then they have to adapt democratic values. And democratic values is holding referendums. But then again, if we look at Great Britain and Spain, they've refused to hold referendums for Scotland and what was the Barcelona area called? Don't remember, but that Barcelona region with their own Catalonia. Who knows? Difficult to say, but essentially, I would say probably the African peace deal, if you've read that, that's probably a reasonable one, in my opinion. They didn't refuse. We had a vote and we voted to stay. It was a one in a lifetime vote. Yeah, I guess so. I think what people complain about with the Scotland thing is that they voted and then like a year after or something like that, they voted to get out of the EU, and then some people complain, well, the situation has changed. We should be able to vote again. Like I have limited knowledge about this, so I'm not going to act like I know about it. But from the limited knowledge, this is what I know. Or I think. I'm not sure if I know, because it could be wrong. Weeb, if you were in charge of Russian military, what would you do over the next year? Okay, so if you ask me if I'm the Russian military leader and political leader, that's two different things, because you have to consider politics and you have to consider military as separate entities. They discuss with each other about what they need and what they want. Because you have to think about it this way. The military will always look to have more money and more power. And the politicians will also always look to have more money and more power. Because what makes a politician popular is that they use money on the groups that support them. Now, if you are a military guy, you would want as much money as possible to the military. But if a country uses all of the money on the military, then where's all the welfare money, where's all the hospital, all of these things. So there's a lot of other stuff that is not going to be paid for if the money is used on the military. Meanwhile, as a politician, you would want to share the money around with different groups so that everyone is satisfied. You want to satisfy as many people as possible. So as a military guy, I would of course say, I need more weapons, I need more soldiers. With more weapons, more soldiers, and better training, all of these require more money. So I need a lot more money. So I'd ask for a lot more money, I'd ask for more weapons, soldiers, and so on. And that is what we're seeing. Russia is increasing their production of weapons. They're sending more soldiers to the front line, and they are upgrading their weapons. They're sending more weapons, all of these things, and they're improving their training. Based on the experience they receive on the war, they sent veterans of the war back as instructors to the mobilized and volunteers forces. So they're essentially doing what I would do from a organizational structure. However, what I would do, I don't know if it's different from what they're doing, because I'm not really sure how much they're doing. But I would essentially launch investigations into all of these claims and always try to be on top of the issues. What they seem to do so, there was an interview with a Russian mobilized soldier who returned after a 6-month shift. Essentially, he said there's been a lot of complaints about the salaries of the mobilized forces. And then he said, in the first 3 months, he didn't receive any salary, and he complained and all of that stuff. And then he received all 3 months of salary at the same time in a delayed payment. So essentially, yes, there's a lot of issues. They even recognize that there are these issues, but they fix these issues. Or maybe it was because he's a lawyer. He knows how to fix these issues. But essentially, from what I know, although issues do arise on a political perspective, or organizational perspective, they're usually fixed. The biggest issue for the Russian forces if we take different statements from Russian leaders and from what we see on the field, is that they are the generals are failing to adapt. Some of them are. Some of them are useless, essentially. And some of them are very useful. Someone like Surovikin seems to have proved his worth throughout this war. Someone like the Russian general who was in charge of Vuhledar seems to have proven that he is not that useful. So from my perspective, I would replace the useless generals with hopefully new recruits who are more useful. We have to see from the experience, based on their merits and all of that stuff, who's the most suitable to replace these guys. If no one is suitable to replace them, then we'll have to train some new forces up. But essentially what I would be doing is that I would get very close to what's happening, similar to what Prigozhin is doing. Visit the front line, back line, not really the front line, because if the leader of the military gets killed, that's a big issue. It's no real point to risk yourself to that degree, because you can send others on your behalf. So you just need someone you can trust on your behalf to be sent there. But you can go to like Mariupol, Berdyansk, Melitopol, Luhansk, these areas that is in the zone of conflict, but outside of direct threat, especially if you keep your visit undercover. And then generally speak with the soldiers, speak with the personnel, speak with the civilians who are close to the conflict, see what they feel, what they see, and all of these things, so that you can get a better sense of what's actually happening and adapt the situation accordingly. If I was the political leader, then I'd try to get the war over as soon as possible, because although quote-unquote war is profitable, it is not in the long term. Or it is in the... I'm not really sure. Don't know all of that political stuff about war, why they want to go to war. But essentially, the faster they win the war, either side, the faster the war ends, that's probably better from my perspective. So I would look at what options make it most reliable. Like, what is the most reliable, with the least amount of casualties and the most benefits, fastest way to end the war, and I'll probably go with that. Exactly, that is not profitable. All right, I think that is everything. Thank you everyone for joining. We peaked at 2,208 viewers. Thank you very much for joining. We've gone through a lot. We've talked about history legends. We've talked about the war. We've talked about civil war. We've talked about information acting. A lot of information, a lot of stuff to do here. But that is going to be all for this live stream. We've been streaming for 1 hour and 22 minutes. Pretty good. One of my longer streams. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time. Make sure to check out my Patreon, PayPal, all of that stuff. And thank you very much for all of the donations in the stream. It really helps me out a lot. And thank you everyone for all of the support. See you all next time.